Hello, everyone. I am Darryl E. McCullough, and I want to thank you for joining me once again for another video. I want to express something to you. With me collecting African art for well over 30 years and trying to acquire some of the better copies of African art, it can be quite expensive. And because of that, I'm very thankful for the other hobbies that I do have, and I have a lot of them. But one of them that I find a lot of fun and excitement in is my joy of music. Now, I got to tell you, it was hard work getting my albums out of storage and showcasing them. Not to mention another collection that I inherited, and I'll speak on that later, but I have spoke on that in previous videos. Now, with everything that I collect, I have quality standards. You know, in my opinion, what's the sense in saying, hey, I got 1,000 albums if 50% of them are scratched to the heavens? Not my collection. If there's something that I pulled out, an album that is scratched severely, it is either replaced or put in the Goodwill bin. Now, let's talk first pressings. As I mentioned, I have inherited a jazz collection, and in that collection, there are at least 20 to 30 first pressings dating back from the 1950s. Let's go between the late 1950s to early 1970s. First pressings are great, and not to mention that what I've acquired are in good to great condition. Two, namely, these Lee Morgan albums that are behind me. I have others like Miles Davis, Grant Green, John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, just to name a few. So first pressings are great when you inherit them, but they're not so much fun when you are trying to purchase them because they can be quite expensive. Like I said, hey, I mean, with the African art, you know, I'm just getting out of African art rehab, and I'm not trying to get in a lot of debt, you know, with vinyl albums. Now let's talk stereo equipment. I remember in my early 20s, I went over a friend's house, and he was an older guy, and he had like a smaller home. However, he built an addition, and this addition was strictly for music. It was like a vaulted ceiling. He had these huge speakers, and he had these cool chairs that you sit in, like the Maxell commercial when I was a kid, where the guy sits in these chairs and they put the Maxell tape in, and it's so loud that it's blowing his hair and the chair backwards from the loud sound and quality of the music. My friend had a Macintosh stereo, and I didn't know anything about Macintosh back then, but I did know that it looked expensive. It looked like it was quality, and it seemed heavy. I later found out that Macintosh, each component can cost you up to $2,000 per component, and they're heavy, 40, 50 pounds for each component. So every song that he played on his stereo, it sounded amazing. And I asked him, you know, could you make a tape of, you know, he played this one jazz song, and I was like, man, that is cool. Can you make a tape of it? so that, I can play it when I get home. I actually still have that tape after all these years, Special Jazz. So I got home, and at the time I had a Fisher stereo, and Fisher is, you get everything in one shot. You could probably lift it up and spin it on one hand. It was so cheap, and I remember it had this real thin speaker wire. But I was a kid, and it was fine for what I needed at that time. So I got home, put the tape in my Fisher stereo, and it sounded totally different. It's, like I was like, man, where's that sound of the horn, the crispness? There were so many sounds missing. That experience was so important to me. It taught me the importance of quality and great sound. So, I could not afford a Macintosh, especially back then. But I could afford something else that starts with the letter M, and that is a Marantz. When I got my first real job, I was working third shift at a chemical plant in Wickliffe, Ohio. With my first paycheck, I treated myself to this Marantz stereo. It cost me about $700 back then in the late 1980s. That was a lot of money back then. And my stereo is still going strong almost 40 years later. Now, because of this, I became a huge fan of Marantz stereo equipment. I love this system so much that I started building another one, and that was due to a childhood friend mine. I was over his house, and he has a ton of stereo equipment, just all over the place. And he works on equipment and everything. And he said, hey, you always like Marantz, right? And I was like, yeah. He gave me a Marantz AV surround receiver. And it's black in color. It's huge. It weighs a ton. It's nice. Very appreciative of that gift. Now, it worked with my system that I was building. However, because it's made for basically a television, surround sound and everything, it's not the best for analog music. So what I did, I, saved my pennies, nickel, dimes, and quarters, and I stepped it up, and I got a Superscope by Marantz, and I'd like to share that with you now. Okay, so I purchased this equipment from my friend Zohar. Check out his demo video of these components in the description. His stereo equipment from his eBay store, I gotta tell you, is top notch. My Superscope receiver arrived, no problems whatsoever, and it's a lovely complement to my Marantz Spectrum analyzer equalizer. This has been fun, but it's also been expensive. Vintage stereo equipment can be expensive, but I do believe it's worth it. The system sounds amazing, especially with my Klipsch speakers. I always like these speakers, also because you can spot them a mile away with the copper painted woofers. I wish I could play some Coltrane or some Miles for you, but I can't because of copyrights. So I'm going to enjoy the rest of the day listening to some nice jazz music. Now, earlier I had told you the tape that my friend made of the jazz song. I actually had I got the tape. I still have it. I also bought the actual album, and it's called Polarization. It's from a trombonist, Julian Priester, and the song is that was so, I don't know, riveting to me in my young ears was Polarization and Rhythm Magnet. It's not one of those jazz songs with a steady beat. To me, it sounds like a bunch of guys tuning up, and then it comes together and they form a song that's actually beautiful, and it sounds fantastic through a stereo. So I want to thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next video.